to Math Vaathiyaar. In this video, we will be taking a look at integers, which is the third type of number on our list. So without further ado, let's get into this lecture. Okay, so on the whiteboard here, I have written some important facts about integers. So let's go through them one by one. So integers, what are they? Any positive or negative whole number is an integer. So we talked about whole numbers in a lot more detail in the previous video. So I suggest that you watch that video before watching this one if you want to have a better understanding of what whole numbers are and what they mean. But for those of you who already have an understanding of what whole numbers are, I'll just sort of summarize or give you a recap of what I talked about in the previous video and the link for the previous video or for this series. So this is a series. We'll be talking about all the types of numbers in mathematics in this series. So the link for that playlist is in the description below. So in that, if you click that link, you'll be able to see all my videos about the types of numbers. You'll see that playlist on your screen. Anyway, so whole numbers. Any number that does not consist of any fractional part or contain a decimal point are whole numbers. So basically what I mean by that is that numbers that have a fractional part to them, such as this number here, this is actually a mixed fraction. We talked about mixed fractions earlier in another video. But 2 2/3, this is not a whole number because it contains a fractional part. Likewise, this number here, 15.23, is not a whole number because it contains a decimal point. And even if your number contains a decimal point, you have to make sure that the values that are to the right of the decimal point, so to the right of the decimal point, are greater than 0, or the values there are greater than 0. So you have to make sure that. But since this number here, both of the values that are to the right of the decimal point contain value and are greater than 0, we do have to consider the decimal points, the decimal here and the numbers that are to the right of it. Therefore, this is not a whole number. But what about if I give you this number, 15.0000? Is this a whole number? Well, some of you may think, okay, it contains a decimal point, therefore it isn't a whole number. But you would actually be incorrect on that because, like I said earlier, the values that are to the right of the decimal point are all zeros. You see, notice how I said all zeros. So even if you had something like this, 15.05, you still have a 5. You still have a number that is greater, a value that is greater than 0 to the right of the decimal point. Therefore, you have to consider the 0 as well there. So you have to consider 15.05, and this number above would not be a whole number, but the number below would be a whole number because these zeros are just there for the sake of adding numbers to the right of the decimal point. They do not represent any value. In some cases, 0 may act as a placeholder, like for this number above. 0 is just there to show that you have no value in the, we call this the tenths place, and then the hundredths place. So you're just using 0 as a placeholder here, but that's something that we'll cover in another video. But 15.0000, all the zeros do not need to be considered. Therefore, 15.00 is equal to 15. And 15 is a whole number. Therefore, 15.000000 is a whole number. So these are examples for numbers that are not whole numbers. So you probably would have gotten, gotten a better understanding of what a whole number is now. So any number that does not contain a decimal point or consist of a fractional component or a fractional part is not a whole number. Okay, so that is what an integer or what a whole number is. So integers are basically any positive or negative whole number. So what I mean by positive, values that are greater than 0. So any value that is to the right of 0 on a number line, or that is greater than 0 in a number line, or greater than 0 is a positive number, while any number that is below 0, that is less than 0, that is to the left of 0 on a number line is a negative number. So these are what positive, negative numbers, what they mean. So all the whole numbers that exist between negative infinity and positive infinity are integers. So such examples include, I've only included some examples here, but 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, dot, 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 60, then 600, 6,000, 60,000, 600,000, 6 million. All these numbers are whole numbers because they do not contain decimal point and they do not consist of any fractional parts. They're all whole numbers. And same here, negative 1, negative 2, negative 3, dot, 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 negative 300, negative 450, negative 4,000, negative 400,000. I'm not sure if we've seen temperatures like negative 400,000 before. But these are all numbers that are negative numbers and negative whole numbers. So all of these numbers would be considered as or looked as integers in mathematics. Another way of describing integers, or saying the definition of an integer, or to describe the criteria for determining whether a given number is an integer or not, is that integers include all natural numbers and the opposites or the negatives of natural numbers. So what do I mean by that? So we talked about natural numbers in the first video. Basically, positive whole numbers that contain value are natural numbers. So basically that means numbers that are on the positive side, or that are greater than 0 but not equal to 0. So 0 would not be a natural number because it does not contain any value. But 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, any number that you would use to count physical items, or count things, are natural numbers, and the opposites of those natural numbers, so the negatives of those natural numbers. So if I were to say 2 is a natural number, the opposite of that would also be an integer as well. So if I were to say that 3 is a natural number, negative 3 would be an integer. Likewise, 3 is also an integer as well. So this is another way of describing what integers are. And here I've listed the types of integers. Nothing really difficult here. It's basically what we talked about throughout this video. Positive integers, which include examples, but not limited. So the examples I say here are not all the integers. I'm just listing a few integers that I thought of at the top of my head when I was writing this. But 163, 919, 400,000, 1 billion with 9 zeros. These are all positive examples of positive integers. Negative integers include negative 1, negative 2, negative 20, negative 250, negative 500,000. These are all examples of negative integers. And neutral integers. So what do you think would be a number that falls into this type? Well, you guessed it right. 0. It is neither positive or negative. That is why we call it a neutral integer. And I would say that 0 acts as the median that splits the bottom half, or the lower half, and the upper half of this number line we have here. So because anything that is to the right or that is greater than 0 automatically becomes a positive number, and anything that is below 0, even a small amount, anything that is below 0 would automatically become a negative number. So that is something that I found interesting when I was studying this in school. Anyway, so let's just take a look at some examples of integers. Negative 25. Would this be an integer? Think about it. It's negative. Is this a whole number? Is this a negative or positive whole number? Yes. So therefore, this is an integer. 5. Is this an integer? Yes. It's a positive whole number. 4 and a half. 4 and a half. Is this an integer? Think about it. If we have a number line here, where would 4.5 be placed on this number line? Okay, so it's a value that is greater than 4. Therefore, we are looking somewhere that is to the right of 4 and that is below 5 in value. So, and it's the halfway. There's a half here. This number consists of a fractional part. So you automatically know that the number that you're looking for is in between 4 and 5. And you'll realize that it is not a whole number because it's between two whole numbers. So anything that is between two whole numbers would not be considered as a whole number or an integer or a natural number as well. So that is something to keep in mind. Therefore, this is not an integer. What about negative 2.75? It's a negative number, but is it a whole number? No. Therefore, negative 2.75, 4.5, all these types of numbers are not integers because they are not whole numbers. And this concludes our lecture about integers. In the next video, we will be taking a look at rational numbers. So we'll see each other then. Math Vaathiyaar. See you soon. Thank you.